A queen just killed a holy man in front of her own son. A city is burning. And a princess who saw her own death coming has finally walked toward it. This is House of the Dragon Season 3, Episode 8, and by the time the credits roll, almost nothing is left standing, including the person Rhaenyra used to be. Let's start with the tapestry, because if you've been paying attention all season, you already know it's never just decoration hanging on a wall. Every stitch in that thing has been quietly narrating the story since Season 1, and in this episode, for the first time, we watch part of it actually catch fire. That's not a coincidence, and it's not just a visual flourish either. Helena is the one who's been sewing these tapestries all along, working through her visions one thread at a time, and this episode marks the end of her contributions. Once you know that, the burning stops looking like set dressing and starts looking like a countdown clock, ticking toward something the show has been building toward for weeks. The episode opens on panic, not politics. Rhaenyra learns that Aegon II is alive, and the news doesn't just rattle her strategically, it cracks something deeper. This is a woman who has spent this entire season telling herself that the gods put her on that throne, that her sons didn't die for nothing, that there's a cosmic reason she's the one wearing the crown. Aegon coming back from the dead does more than threaten her claim militarily. It threatens the story she's been telling herself just to get out of bed every morning. And when that story starts to wobble, we don't get a queen delivering a calm, calculated response. We get a woman screaming at the memory of her dead father, because blaming Viserys is easier than admitting she might be wrong. That anger sends her straight back to Daemon, and it's worth pausing on why that matters. Every single time this season that Rhaenyra has pushed Daemon away, she's made a choice that looks, at least for a moment, like restraint. And every time she's pulled him back in, it's because she's furious, frightened, or both. Daemon isn't just her husband in this story. He's basically a barometer for how far gone she is. When she's keeping distance from him, there's still a version of her trying to rule with some kind of principle. When she's back in his orbit, that version disappears, and what's left is someone who wants blood more than she wants a functioning kingdom. Meanwhile, across the city, we get a quieter but just as telling scene between Baela and Rhaenyra. Baela brings up Corlys, still a captive of the Greens, and doesn't hold back. She flat out tells the queen that his capture is her fault. And here's the thing, she's not wrong. Corlys left King's Landing because Rhaenyra refused to legitimize his grandsons, and that refusal is what put him in enemy hands in the first place. Rhaenyra's response isn't to reflect on that. It's to remind Baela of her place, which, if you zoom out, is becoming a pattern. Person after person gets close enough to challenge her, and person after person gets pushed away for it. By this point in the season, there's really only one person left standing close enough to still have her ear, and we just established who that is. There's a smaller moment buried in here too, involving Alan introducing himself to a regiment of Valyrian soldiers. He doesn't just call himself Corlys' son, he calls himself the heir, the future lord of the tides. That's a big claim for a man who, legally, has no name of his own yet. He can't actually inherit anything unless Rhaenyra formally legitimizes him, and right now she hasn't. So why say it out loud in front of armed men who could easily turn on him for the lie? Because Alan has started to believe his closeness to the queen is worth more than it actually is. He's in love with Baela, there's no future for them without a title, and he's beginning to gamble his identity on the hope that loyalty will eventually be rewarded with legitimacy. It's a quiet character beat, but it's setting up something that's going to matter a lot more later. And then there's Hugh. Watching Daemon leave for Tumbleton, Hugh makes his own choice to defy orders and follow him there, not out of ambition, but because his family is trapped inside that town. It's a smaller betrayal than what we'll see from Ulf later in the episode, but it's cut from the same cloth. These dragon riders keep proving, one by one, that loyalty bought with power isn't loyalty at all. It's leverage, and leverage only holds as long as it benefits the person holding it. Rhaenyra built her army on men who owe her nothing personally, and this episode is where that decision starts collecting its price. Over in Tumbleton, we get a very different kind of storytelling, one that's less about political maneuvering and more about watching a system built on cruelty start to eat itself. Ormond Hightower knights Daeron in a formal ceremony, complete with an oath to protect the weak and defend the innocent. It would almost be moving if it weren't happening in the same breath as Ormond's actual strategy, which involves holding an entire town of civilians hostage and, as we'll see later, placing children directly in the path of danger to protect his own position. The gap between what these lords say they stand for and what they actually do isn't subtle in this episode. It's the whole point. Daeron gets a new title, the Daring, But the writers seem to be setting up a quiet irony. The most daring thing he does all season isn't fighting. It's trying to stop a fight that everyone around him seems determined to have. Back in King's Landing, Rhaenyra makes a decision that might be the most quietly devastating one of the entire episode, and it's easy to miss because there's no yelling, no dragons, no bloodshed attached to it. She sends Mysaria away. On its surface, it looks like a minor administrative choice. Underneath, it's Rhaenyra severing her last real emotional tether to anyone who isn't Daemon. Mysaria has spent this entire season pushing her toward mercy, toward patience, toward ruling like the version of herself she used to admire. The night before, the two of them shared something genuinely intimate. And now, with Aegon's return shaking her confidence, Rhaenyra doesn't just distance herself from that vision of leadership. She exiles the person who represents it. It's not hard to guess how that goes. Mysaria has no protection at court beyond the Queen's favor, and the second that favor disappears, so does any reason for her to stay loyal. Within the same episode, she's already whispering warnings to Helaena, undoing whatever trust Rhaenyra thought she still had left. Cruelty, in this show, almost always comes back around. It just takes its time doing it. And then there's Helaena. If this episode has an emotional center, it's her. She's been unraveling for weeks, and this episode makes it painfully clear why. She spent her entire life finding comfort in small, overlooked things. Insects, quiet moments, details nobody else in the Red Keep bothers to notice. It's not eccentric, it's survival. When you have no power over the big, violent machinery of the realm, you learn to find peace in what's small enough to actually hold on to. But Rhaenyra keeps taking even that away from her, pulling the tapestry out of her hands, forcing her to eat when she refuses, treating her prophetic visions as a resource to extract rather than a person in pain. There's a moment where Helaena tells Rhaenyra she doesn't understand beauty anymore, that everything she cares about now is ugly. It lands like a diagnosis. Rhaenyra isn't just losing allies. She's losing her own capacity to see anything beyond power. The scene where Rhaenyra confronts the High Septon deserves its own kind of attention, because it's the moment where her transformation stops being subtle. He refuses to legitimize her, tells her plainly that his gods don't deal in dragons, and warns her that harming him means declaring war on the faith itself. Historically, in this world, that's not an empty threat. There's precedent for kings who went to war with the Septons and paid for it for generations. Rhaenyra knows this. She's smart, she's studied, she understands exactly what she's risking. And she orders his death anyway. What makes it worse isn't the act itself, it's who's standing there watching. Her son Joffrey, freshly returned from Winterfell, walks in just in time to watch his mother order an execution in cold blood. There's no context for him, no explanation, just his mother becoming someone he doesn't recognize, in real time, in front of him. What follows is arguably the most quietly chilling scene of the episode. Rhaenyra addresses her people, but not the way she did earlier in the season, when she stood among them with food and promises. Now she's elevated, guarded, physically separated from the crowd she once tried to win over. Instead of addressing the actual problems in the city, the hunger, the fear, the violence in the streets, she tells them a story. She reveals the Targaryen family secret, the prophecy passed down since Aegon the Conqueror, hoping it will convince them the gods chose her after all. It doesn't land the way she wants it to. To her, it's proof of destiny. To everyone listening, it just sounds like a desperate woman grasping for legitimacy she doesn't actually have. And there's something almost tragic in that gap. She believes she's revealing the truth that justifies everything, and instead she's revealing exactly how far she's drifted from the people she's supposed to be ruling. By the time we reach the walls of Tumbleton, the emotional temperature of the episode has already been set. This isn't going to be a battle about glory or heroics. It's going to be about what happens when powerful people stop caring who gets hurt on the way to winning. The battle for Tumbleton doesn't play out like a triumphant set piece, and that's clearly intentional. Before a single sword is drawn, we're shown children lining the walls, trembling, sick with fear, some of them visibly losing control of their own bodies out of sheer terror. Ormond put them there deliberately, betting that Daemon won't burn innocent kids just to win a battle. It's a horrifying strategy precisely because it works, at least at first. Daemon, who has spent the entire season itching to burn this town to the ground, suddenly finds himself boxed in by his own conscience, or maybe just by the political cost of looking like a monster. So instead, the fighting starts the old-fashioned way, blade against blade, and the show makes sure we feel every bit of how ugly that is. This isn't stylized combat. Soldiers panic. Civilians get caught in the middle. A woman named Kat, someone we've come to know in smaller, human moments earlier in the season, gets crushed between two sides that never actually meant to kill her. Nobody intended that death. It happens anyway. That's kind of the whole thesis of this episode in miniature. Then Ulf arrives on Silverwing, and everything changes in an instant. His betrayal isn't framed as some grand ideological shift. It's simpler and, in a way, sadder than that. He's spent this entire season being handed enormous power and getting almost none of the respect that's supposed to come with it. Rhaenyra treated him like a tool. Ormond, at least for a moment, treated him like he mattered. So when the moment comes, Ulf chooses the side that flattered him, and he does it with a dragon. What follows is less a battle and more a massacre. Dragonfire tears through Tumbleton indiscriminately, and history in this world will remember it as something even worse than the legendary Field of Fire from generations earlier. Ulf isn't fighting with precision or strategy. He's drunk, literally and figuratively, on power he was never prepared to hold responsibly, and the people of Tumbleton pay for that in the most brutal way imaginable. In the middle of all this chaos, Daemon gets pulled into a duel with a man wielding a Valyrian steel blade, and for one of the only times all season, we watch Daemon actually lose. He survives, barely, but the fight leaves him shaken in a way we haven't really seen from him before. It's a small moment buried inside a much larger catastrophe, but it matters, because Daemon has always defined himself through violence, through being the most dangerous person in any room. Watching him nearly lose that fight, and then wake up afterwards surrounded by the wreckage of a town his own side helped destroy, forces him into something he spent his whole life avoiding, a moment of genuine reckoning. He doesn't get to enjoy this war anymore. Nobody does. Back in King's Landing, the episode delivers its final, quietest gut punch. Helena finishes her last piece of embroidery, and it shows exactly what we've suspected for weeks, her own death. She's not portrayed as a woman choosing to end her life in a moment of impulsive despair. It plays more like someone who has already seen the ending and has simply run out of ways to avoid walking toward it. She's been trapped in that castle, stripped of the small joys that once gave her life meaning, tormented by visions she never asked for and never wanted. When she finally goes to the window, it doesn't feel sudden. It feels inevitable, which somehow makes it hit even harder. Alicent, elsewhere in the woods, watches a swarm of butterflies take flight, unaware in that exact moment that her daughter is gone. It's a devastating piece of dramatic irony, and it closes the door on what has been one of the most quietly tragic arcs in the entire series. When Rhaenyra finally returns to the Red Keep and finds out what happened, she looks at the tapestry Helena left behind, the one showing her on the Iron Throne with blood running from her crown and chains wrapped around her body. And for a moment, you can see it land. You can see her understand, even just a little, what she's become and what it's cost the people around her. But instead of that understanding changing anything, she simply closes the window. She shuts out the world, quite literally, and by doing so, she shuts out the last chance for anyone to pull her back from where she's headed. That's really what this episode is about, underneath all the dragons and politics and betrayal. It's about how power doesn't corrupt people all at once. It happens in small decisions, one push away here, one dismissed ally there, one moment of cruelty justified as necessity, until one day you look up and realize everyone who ever challenged you, or loved you, or told you the truth is gone. Rhaenyra didn't lose her humanity in one dramatic moment. She lost it in pieces, episode by episode, choice by choice, and by the end of this one, there's almost nobody left standing close enough to notice. If this breakdown helped you catch something you missed the first time around, do me a favor and hit that like button. It genuinely helps this channel grow. And if you want more deep dives like this one every time a new episode drops, go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss the next breakdown. I'd love to know what you think Rhaenyra's story looks like from here, so drop your theories in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.